The German Shepherd came out of the whiteout alone. Snow clung to his black and tan coat. His leather leash dragged behind him, and a silver K9 badge knocked against his chest with every uneven step. He reached the porch of a small cabin in northern Montana, struck the door once with his paw, then turned toward the forest and stared into the storm. 11-year-old Lily Bennett saw him through the window. The dog did not whine. He did not beg to come inside. He stood rigid in the blowing snow, ears forward, breathing hard, as if the only thing keeping him upright was a duty he had not finished. Then he looked directly at Lily and ran back into the trees. Before we continue, tell us what city or state you are watching from. And if you believe loyalty is proven by what we do when leaving would be easier, share your thoughts and subscribe for more stories about courage, second chances, and the bond between people and K9s. Lily had been staying with her grandfather, Cal Bennett, for winter break. The cabin sat 5 miles beyond the last paved road, where cell service disappeared and pine trees crowded the mountainside. Cal had spent the morning repairing the fuel line on his snowmobile, while Lily sorted old photographs at the kitchen table. She had just found one of her late grandmother standing beside a line of working dogs when the German Shepherd appeared. "Grandpa," Lily called. "There is a dog outside." Cal wiped his hands on a rag and came to the window. By then the porch was empty, but deep tracks cut across the yard and vanished between the trees. "He had a badge," Lily said. "A real K9 badge." Cal's expression changed. He opened the door and studied the tracks. Wind pushed needles of snow across the porch. No one should be on the North Trail in this weather. He wanted us to follow. Cal glanced toward the dark line of forest. The storm had arrived 2 hours earlier than predicted. Visibility was falling by the minute, and the temperature had dropped below zero. Going into the woods was dangerous. Ignoring a trained dog asking for help was worse. He pulled on his heavy coat, clipped a radio to his belt, and handed Lily a bright orange safety vest. "You, stay beside me. No running ahead." They had taken fewer than 20 steps when the German Shepherd reappeared. He waited until he saw them, then moved deeper into the forest. Every 30 yards, he stopped and looked back. The trail climbed toward an old logging road no longer shown on most maps. Fallen branches crossed the path. Snow had already filled the dog's first set of tracks, but he seemed to know exactly where he was going. After half a mile, he left the trail and descended into a narrow ravine. Cal raised one hand. Slowly, he warned. Lily saw the man before Cal did. He lay beneath the broken limbs of a fallen pine, one shoulder pressed against a snow-covered rock. His gray winter jacket bore the faded patch of a County K9 unit. One boot was trapped under a branch. A dark wool cap had fallen several feet away. The German Shepherd rushed to him and lowered his body against the man's chest. Cal knelt and touched 2 fingers to the stranger's neck. "He is alive." The man's name was stitched above his pocket. Ethan Walker. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. A thin line of frozen blood marked his temple, but there was no serious open wound. The greater danger was the cold. Cal used a compact saw from his pack to cut away the smaller branches. Lily spread an emergency blanket over Ethan while the German Shepherd watched every movement. When Cal reached for the trapped boot, the dog gave a low warning growl. "He thinks you are hurting him," Lily said. "I know." She moved into the dog's line of sight and slowly held out her gloved hand. His eyes shifted to her. They were tired, alert, and filled with a focus that made him seem older than the gray around his muzzle. "We are helping him," she whispered. "You brought us here." The dog's ears flicked. The growl faded. Cal freed Ethan's leg and checked it carefully. "Likely broken. We need the rescue sled." He tried his radio, but static answered. The ravine blocked the signal. "I have to climb back to the ridge," he said. "Lily, you are coming with me." The German Shepherd stood. Then Ethan's hand moved weakly from beneath the blanket and found the dog's collar. "Ranger," he breathed. The K9 immediately lowered himself again. Ethan opened his eyes for only a second. He looked at Lily, then at Cal, but his fingers remained curled in Ranger's fur. "Do not let him go," he whispered. Cal leaned closer. "We will get both of you out." Ethan seemed to hear him. His eyes closed. Cal looked toward the ridge, then toward the deepening tracks behind them. "I can reach the radio repeater faster alone. You stay here, keep the blanket around him, and do not move unless the tree shifts." Lily's stomach tightened. She had never been alone in a storm with an injured stranger and a working dog. but she saw Ranger press closer to Ethan, using his own body to block the wind. I will stay. Cal climbed toward the ridge. For the next 12 minutes, Lily listened to the storm erase the world around her. She kept one hand on the blanket and the other near Ranger's shoulder. He did not look at her again. His attention remained on Ethan's breathing. When Ethan shivered, Ranger shifted closer. When a branch cracked above them, Ranger lifted his head. When Lily's courage began to slip, the dog leaned lightly against her knee without leaving his partner. That small touch steadied her. She looked at the badge on his collar. Beneath the name Ranger was a service number and a scratched line of words. Second watch. Lily did not know what it meant. She only knew that the old K9 had walked through a blizzard, found the only cabin for miles, and returned to the man he refused to abandon. What she could not know was that Ethan had come to these mountains carrying a promise made 13 years earlier. A promise tied to Lily's family, Ranger's first days of training, and the worst decision Ethan believed he had ever made. The storm had brought them together. The truth waiting beneath it would test whether any of them were ready to stay. Cal reached the ridge on his second attempt and finally raised the volunteer rescue team. By the time he returned, 2 snowmobiles were fighting their way up the logging road with a medical sled between them. Ranger heard the engines before anyone else. He rose, placed himself over Ethan, and stared toward the trees. Lily kept her hand low and calm. They are with us, she said. The first rescuer down the slope was Deputy Maria Ortiz, a compact woman with ice crusted across her radio microphone. She recognized the patch on Ethan's jacket, then stopped when she saw the dog. Ranger. The German shepherd turned his head at the sound of his name. Maria's surprise lasted only a moment. She knelt several feet away and spoke in the measured voice of someone who understood working dogs. Easy, partner. We are taking Ethan somewhere warm. Ranger watched while the team stabilized Ethan's leg, fitted a neck support, and moved him onto the sled. He objected only once, when one rescuer tried to pull him away. Maria changed the plan. She tied a short line to his collar and let him walk beside Ethan. The trip back took nearly an hour. Wind erased the trail behind them, and twice the lead snowmobiles sank into drifts. Ranger never stumbled far from the sled. When Ethan's covered hand slipped over the edge, the dog nosed it until Maria tucked it safely beneath the blankets. At the cabin, the rescue team set Ethan near the fire while they waited for the storm to ease enough for an ambulance to meet them at the lower road. Cal brought warm water. Lily sat on the floor beside Ranger, who refused food but accepted several careful drinks. Maria examined his paws. One pad was split from the ice, and there were raw marks where his harness had rubbed, but he had no major injury. How far did he travel? Lily asked. Maria looked toward the forest. Far enough to save a life. Ethan regained consciousness shortly after dark. His first word was not a question about his leg or the storm. Ranger. The dog stood and crossed the room before anyone answered. He rested his muzzle beside Ethan's hand. Ethan's fingers moved through the fur between his ears. Good boy, he whispered, and the relief in his voice made Lily look away for a moment. Cal noticed the small brass whistle hanging from a cord around Ethan's neck. His face went still. Where did you get that? Ethan followed his gaze. It belonged to Margaret Collins. The room changed. Cal lowered himself into the chair opposite him. Margaret Collins was my wife. Ethan stared at him. Lily looked. From one man to the other. Her grandmother had died when Lily was 4. Most of what she knew came from photographs and the stories Cal told on quiet evenings. Margaret had trained search dogs, volunteered with county rescue teams, and believed every retired working animal deserved a home with the person it trusted most. Ethan slowly reached inside his jacket. The movement caused him pain, and Maria tried to stop him, but he insisted. From an inner waterproof pocket, he removed a weathered field journal wrapped in waxed cloth. Margaret gave me this before she died, he said. She asked me to bring it here when I was ready. Cal did not touch the journal. That was 7 years ago. I know. Then why now? Ethan looked at Ranger. Shame passed across his face before he answered. Because I spent 7 years pretending I had not heard her. The ambulance could not reach them that night. The road below the cabin had drifted shut, and the county plow was still clearing a path. Maria remained with them, monitoring Ethan while the other volunteers returned to help open the road. Cal set the journal on the table but did not unwrap it. Anger made his movements precise. He brought Ethan soup, checked the fire, and prepared a folded cot without asking another question. Lily knew that kind of silence. It meant her grandfather was holding more words than he trusted himself to say. Ranger finally ate after Ethan did. He took a few bites, looked up at his partner, then finished the bowl. Later, while Maria spoke on the radio, Lily sat beside Ethan. "Why did Grandma give you her whistle?" Ethan studied her face. "You have her eyes." Cal turned from the fireplace. Ethan continued carefully. "Your grandmother trained me when I joined the K-9 unit. I knew how to wear a badge. I knew how to follow procedure. I did not know how to build a partnership with a dog. Margaret taught me that commands can control behavior, but trust changes what a team is capable of." Ranger lay with his chin across Ethan's uninjured boot. "She chose him for you?" Lily asked. "In a way." Ranger had failed 2 early placements. Lily looked offended on his behalf. "He was not aggressive," Ethan explained. "He was too independent. If a command made no sense to him, he hesitated. Some trainers saw stubbornness. Margaret saw judgment. She paired us because I followed rules too easily, and he questioned them." Despite himself, Cal almost smiled. Ethan glanced at the journal. "She said we might keep each other honest." "What happened?" Lily asked. The smile disappeared. Ethan took a long breath. "We were good together. Then one night, something went wrong. A boy was trapped inside an abandoned mill. Another handler and his K-9 were missing on the opposite side of the building. Ranger alerted toward the boy. I followed him." "And the other team?" Cal asked. "I believe backup had reached them." It had not. The fire snapped. "The boy survived," Ethan said. "The other dog, Scout, was badly injured. His handler, Daniel Brooks, never blamed Ranger. He blamed me. I blamed me more." "Was it your fault?" Lily asked. "I disobeyed an order to hold position." "Because Ranger found the boy." "Yes." "That does not answer her question," Cal said. Ethan looked toward the storm-dark window. "For 13 years, I have not known how to answer it." A vehicle horn sounded faintly beyond the cabin. Maria checked the window. The plow may have opened the lower road. But Ranger was already on his feet. His posture had changed. He was not reacting to rescue workers. Headlights moved between the trees. A dark county truck pushed through the final drift and stopped near the porch. The driver stepped out wearing a K-9 unit jacket. He was broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, and walked with a stiffness that had little to do with the cold. Daniel Brooks entered the cabin without knocking. His eyes found Ethan first, then Ranger. For several seconds, all the years between the two men seemed to stand in the room with them. Daniel looked at the bandaged leg, the journal on the table, and Margaret's whistle around Ethan's neck. "You always did choose the worst possible time to come back," he said. Ethan's hand tightened in Ranger's fur. Daniel's voice was controlled, but hurt lived beneath it. "I heard the radio call. I thought they had the wrong name." "They did not." "No." Daniel looked at Ranger. "They did not." Ranger crossed half the distance between them, stopped, and waited. Daniel swallowed. He lowered one hand. The old K-9 sniffed his fingers, then pressed his nose briefly into Daniel's palm. Whatever anger Daniel had prepared did not survive that greeting unchanged. He looked away. Cal placed the wrapped journal between them. "My wife left this for Ethan," he said. "And apparently she left the rest of us inside it." Daniel's face lost color. Ethan noticed. "You know what is in there." Daniel did not answer. Outside, the storm pressed against the cabin walls. Inside, Ranger moved back to Ethan's side, but his eyes remained on the man by the door. Daniel had come because he had heard an old partner was in danger. He had also come because the journal contained a truth he had spent 13 years trying not to face. No one opened the journal that night. Maria insisted Ethan needed rest, and Daniel volunteered to drive behind the ambulance once the road was clear. Cal gave him the small room near the mudroom. Lily was sent upstairs, though she stayed awake long enough to hear low voices moving beneath the floorboards. At dawn, the storm had passed. The world outside the cabin looked newly made. Every roofline and branch softened beneath fresh snow. Ethan left for the county clinic with Ranger lying behind the front seat of Daniel's truck. Lily watched from the porch until the taillights disappeared. Before climbing in, Ethan had placed Margaret's journal in Cal's hands. "Do not read it without me," he said. Cal's answer was not gentle. "You had 7 years. You can give me 1 day." Still, he kept the journal wrapped. The clinic confirmed a fractured ankle, 2 cracked ribs, and mild hypothermia. Ethan was lucky. The fallen pine had trapped him near a rock that blocked the worst wind, and Ranger's body heat had kept his temperature from falling further. The doctor fitted a walking boot and ordered him to stay off the mountain. Ethan listened with the expression of a man who had spent much of his life treating orders as suggestions when they interfered with unfinished work. Daniel noticed, "You are not going back up there. I have to reach the north. Look out. Not on that leg." Margaret marked it in the journal. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I know." Ethan turned toward him. They were alone in the exam room except for Ranger, who lay between their chairs. "How do you know?" Daniel rubbed his thumb across an old scar on his wrist. "Because she told me. Before she got sick. And you never thought to mention that. You were gone. You had my number. You changed it twice. You knew where I lived." Daniel stood too quickly, knocking the chair against the wall. Ranger lifted his head. Daniel lowered his voice. "I knew where you were. I did not know if I had the right to drag you back into something you had chosen to leave. I left the unit. I did not leave Ranger. No. You took him the minute retirement papers cleared. 8 months later. I kept him alive during those 8 months." The words landed hard. Daniel looked at Ranger, and his anger thinned into grief. Scout came home from the mill, but he was never the same. Ranger would lie outside his kennel every night. He would not eat until Scout ate. When Scout's pain got worse, Ranger stayed beside him through every appointment. "Do you know that?" Ethan shook his head. "Of course you do not. You were trying so hard to punish yourself that you missed what the dogs were doing. They did not blame each other. They did not divide the world into guilty and innocent. They stayed." Ethan looked down at his hands. Daniel's voice broke slightly. "Scout died 3 months before Ranger retired. I could not bring myself to call you. I thought hearing your voice would make me say things I could not take back. You said them anyway." "Yes." Silence settled between them. Ranger rose and walked to Daniel. He nudged the man's closed fist once. Daniel opened it, and the dog placed his chin across his palm. Ethan watched the same K9 comfort the two men who had spent 13 years refusing to comfort each other. "What is at the lookout?" he asked. Daniel kept his hand beneath Ranger's muzzle. A metal dispatch box. Margaret put the complete incident records inside it. Radio logs. Training notes. Her written assessment. 1 audio file. Why hide them there? She did not hide them. She protected them. The official review was closed before all the communication failures were documented. The county wanted the attention to end. Margaret believed one day you and I would need the whole truth more than the department needed a clean report. "And you have heard the audio." Daniel's silence answered. Ethan's face hardened. "What does it say?" "That you called for a second team before entering the mill. Your transmission reached dispatch, but the repeater failed before the acknowledgement came back. It also records my order to hold your position. I remember your order. It records what happened after that." Ranger alerted twice toward the east stairwell. "You reported a child scent and warned that the floor was failing. Then you said you were moving because waiting would cost the boy his life." Ethan closed his eyes. Daniel continued. "You were right about the boy. You were wrong about one thing. You thought another team had reached me and Scout. Dispatch believed the same thing because a unit number was entered incorrectly. So it was clerical error. It was several errors. Mine included." Ethan looked at him. Daniel stared at the floor. "My radio battery had been showing low for an hour. I should have replaced it. I did not want to delay the search. When the floor collapsed, I could not call out. Scout pulled me toward an exterior wall. Ranger heard him through the building." Ethan frowned. "Ranger was with me. After he led you to the boy, you sent him back with the evacuation officer. I sent him to the door. He left the direct route. He found the gap near the loading dock and brought the outside team to us." Ethan's breath stopped. No one had told him. The review had credited the rescue crew. Ranger's deviation from the handler's command had been described as confusion in heavy smoke. Daniel finally met his eyes. Ranger saved the boy. Then he saved Scout and me. Margaret fought to correct the record. The county decided reopening the report would expose too many failures. "Why did you let me resign believing I abandoned you?" "Because I was angry. Because Scout was hurt. Because admitting Ranger saved us meant admitting your decision had been right while mine nearly trapped us. By the time I was ready to say it, you had disappeared into your guilt, and I had built a career around never looking weak." Ethan's face showed no forgiveness. "Not yet. You took 13 years from me. I know. You took Ranger's truth too." Daniel nodded. Ranger moved away from him and returned to Ethan. He did not growl or reject Daniel. He simply chose his place. Daniel sat down again. Margaret's final note says the dispatch box should be opened with her family present. She wanted Cal to hear it. She wanted you to decide what happened next. Ethan stared through the clinic window at the White Mountains. I was heading to the lookout when the tree came down. I guessed. I had the journal, the map, and her whistle. I thought I could do it alone. Daniel gave a tired, humorless laugh. You learned nothing from the dogs. For the first time, Ethan did not argue. That afternoon, Daniel drove him and Ranger back to the Bennett cabin. Lily ran onto the porch before the truck stopped. Ranger's tail moved once, then faster as she approached. She crouched without throwing her arms around him, remembering he was old and sore. Ranger pushed his forehead gently against her shoulder. Cal stood in the doorway with Margaret's journal. I kept my word, he said. It is still closed. Ethan climbed the steps on crutches. We open it together. They gathered around the kitchen table. Cal unwrapped the wax cloth. The leather cover had been worn smooth by Margaret's hands. Her initials were burned into one corner. The early pages contained training observations. Ranger tested boundaries, but responded to calm direction. Ethan relied on procedure, but noticed details others missed. Pairing recommended. Lily smiled when she heard that. Later entries became personal. Ethan is learning that leadership is not the same as control. Ranger watches him even when released. Trust developing faster than either will admit. Then Cal turned to the final pages. Margaret's handwriting had become less steady. The truth about the mill belongs to all of them. Not for blame. For repair. Beneath those words was a hand-drawn map to the North Lookout and one final instruction. Bring Ethan, Daniel, Ranger, and someone young enough to ask the question the rest of you keep avoiding. Lily looked up. What question? Cal, read the line written below. What will you build from what hurt you? No one spoke. Ranger rested beneath the table, one paw touching Ethan's boot and his back against Daniel's chair. The answer was not in the journal. Margaret had left that part for them. Cal did not want Lily on the mountain. The instruction in Margaret's journal was not enough to change his mind. The North Lookout stood nearly 3 miles above the cabin, beyond a ridge where winter winds could strip warmth from exposed skin in minutes. Ethan could barely cross the kitchen without crutches. Ranger had a bandaged paw. Daniel had already requested the county trail crew wait until conditions improved. Lily listened from the stairs while the adults argued. Margaret wrote that line before she knew a child would be involved, Cal said. It was symbolic. She was rarely symbolic, Daniel replied. She was also not responsible for Lily. I am, Cal said, ending the discussion. Lily returned to her room without protesting. That worried Cal more than an argument would have. Ethan found her later sitting on the floor with the old photograph she had been sorting when Ranger reached the cabin. It showed Margaret in her 40s, kneeling beside 3 young German shepherds. One of them had unusually dark fur along his shoulders. That is Ranger, Lily said. Ethan lowered himself carefully onto the edge of the bed. He was 10 months old. Grandma looks happy. She was happiest when everyone else stopped talking and the dog started showing us what we had missed. Lily traced the edge of the photograph. Grandpa thinks I will get hurt. He is afraid because he loves you. I know. Ethan expected another complaint. Instead, Lily looked at him with the same directness Margaret once used when a handler offered an excuse. Are you afraid to hear the recording? Yes. Because it might prove you were right? The question surprised him. Most people are afraid of being wrong, Lily continued. But if it proves you were right, then you lost 13 years for nothing. Ethan looked toward the doorway, where Ranger had quietly appeared. Not for nothing, he said. I had him. Ranger entered and lay beside Lily. Ethan watched her rest one hand near the dog's shoulder. What would you build? She asked. I do not know. Grandma wanted a home for retired K9S. How do you know? Grandpa talks about it when he thinks I am asleep. She wanted to call it second watch. Dogs spend their first watch protecting people. She thought people owed them a second one. Ethan glanced at Ranger's badge. The words scratched beneath the service number had suddenly become clear. Margaret put that on his collar, he said. Lily nodded. Grandpa said she made 6 tags. She never got to use them. The next morning, the county reported a stable weather window of 6 hours. A trail crew cleared the lower route and inspected the first bridge. Daniel proposed a limited trip with safety gear, a rescue radio, and 2 additional volunteers. Cal still refused to take Lily. Then Ranger made his own decision. As Daniel loaded equipment, the old K9 walked to the porch, picked up Lily's orange safety vest from the bench, and carried it to Cal. He placed it at Cal's boots and waited. No one laughed. Cal looked at the vest, then at the dog who had crossed a blizzard to reach their door. "You were supposed to be on my side," he muttered. Ranger's ears angled forward. Cal finally exhaled. "She stays between me and Maria. One sign of changing weather, we turn around." Lily hugged her grandfather. Ranger stepped back just in time to avoid being included. They left shortly after 8. Ethan rode on a utility sled behind a snowmobile for the first mile, with Ranger beside him in a padded compartment. Once the trail narrowed, everyone continued on foot. Ethan used trekking poles and moved slowly. No one mentioned the pain visible in his face. The forest after the storm was bright and deceptively peaceful. Snow slid from branches in soft bursts. Sunlight flashed through the pines. Ranger wore protective boots and a reflective search harness borrowed from Maria's unit. The years seemed to fall away when she gave him room to work. At the first fork, Daniel pointed toward the marked trail. Ranger stopped. He sniffed the air, moved several yards toward the left route, then returned and stood across the marked path. "What is it?" Lily asked. Daniel studied the slope above them. A smooth shelf of snow curved beneath the trees. Wind slab. The trail crew had crossed safely an hour earlier, but conditions had changed in the sun. Daniel tossed a weighted line onto the path. The surface cracked with a soft, deep sound. A sheet of snow slid across the trail and disappeared into the ravine. Cal stared at Ranger. He knew. He read the surface. Ethan said, "Pressure, scent, sound. He has always noticed danger before the rest of us admit it is there." They took the longer route through dense trees. It added 40 minutes, but no one questioned Ranger again. Near the ridge, they found the remains of an old training marker. Ranger sniffed the weathered post and circled it twice. Ethan smiled. "Margaret used to hide scent articles here." Ranger cheated. "How does a dog cheat?" Lily asked. "He watched where she put her gloves." Daniel shook his head. "That was not cheating. That was intelligence gathering." The joke was small, but it was the first easy exchange between them. Lily heard it and smiled without turning around. The north lookout appeared just before noon. It was a low stone shelter built into the ridge, once used by fire crews. The wooden tower above it had been removed years earlier. Snow covered the roof, and one shutter hung loose. Cal unlocked the rusted door with a key Margaret had taped inside the journal. The room smelled of cold stone and old pine. A narrow table stood beneath the window. On the far wall, 6 empty hooks had labels beneath them. Ranger, Scout, Bell, Otis, June, Max, retired K9 names. Lily walked to Ranger's hook. Below it, Margaret had carved a sentence into the wood. "Their work ends. Our duty does not." Cal closed his eyes. "She built this herself," he said. "I thought she came up here to maintain rescue supplies." Daniel removed his cap. "She brought us once. Before the mill. She said this could become a rest station and, someday, a retirement program. Why did she never tell me?" "She planned to." Then the county review began. Donations disappeared. People did not want their names attached to controversy. Ethan looked at the 6 hooks. "My controversy. Our failure," Daniel corrected. The dispatch box was supposed to be beneath a loose floor stone near the stove. The stone was there. The box was not. For a moment, no one moved. Daniel knelt and reached into the empty space. His face tightened. "There are fresh scrape marks." Cal checked the doorway. Could the trail crew have taken it? They did not enter. Maria examined the dust along the floor. A faint line of melted snow led from the stone to the rear wall. There, an old storage cabinet stood slightly open. Ranger approached it and stopped. His nose worked along the bottom edge. He gave a quiet huff, then pawed once. Daniel pulled the cabinet aside. Behind it was a narrow maintenance door nearly hidden in the stone. Its latch had broken, and drifted snow filled the passage beyond. Cal remembered the shelter's original plans. "That leads to the old signal room." Ranger squeezed through before anyone could stop him. "Ranger," Ethan called. The dog paused, looked back, then continued. Ethan's expression changed. "He is sent." Daniel took the lead with a flashlight. The passage descended 6 steps into a cramped room beneath the ridge. A section of ceiling had collapsed, scattering boards and snow across the floor. The metal dispatch box lay under one of the boards. Beside it was a canvas pack. Maria lifted the pack and read a faded name written across the flap. Margaret Collins. Cal gripped the doorframe. She was here after she got sick. Inside the pack were 6 handmade K9 tags, a bundle of letters, and a small wooden sign painted in Margaret's careful block lettering. Second watch K9 home. Lily held it as if it might break. Daniel freed the dispatch box. Its seal remained intact. Then Ranger stiffened. His head turned toward the collapsed ceiling. A low vibration moved through the stone beneath their feet. Daniel looked up. Everyone out. Now. The warming sun had loosened snow above the damaged signal room. Fine powder began spilling. Between the roof boards, Cal lifted Lily through the passage. Maria pushed the pack ahead of her. Daniel carried the dispatch box. Ethan turned to call Ranger, but the K9 had moved deeper into the room. Ranger! The dog clawed at a mound of snow beside the far wall. The ceiling groaned. Daniel grabbed Ethan's coat. We have to go. He found something. We do not have time. Ranger barked once. Sharp. Insistent. It was the first time Lily had heard him bark. Ethan pulled free and crawled toward him despite his injured leg. Ranger dug again, exposing a red strap beneath the snow. A rescue harness. Someone was buried on the other side of the collapsed wall. Maria dropped to her knees and called through the gap. A weak voice answered. The trail crew had reported all members safe. Someone else had come to the lookout before them, and the roof was beginning to fail. The buried person was conscious, but barely. Maria pushed her arm through the gap and caught the red harness strap. I have him. Another tremor moved through the wall. Dust fell from the beams. Daniel looked at Ethan. 30 seconds. Together they pulled. The strap tightened, but the man on the other side did not move. His leg is caught, Maria said. Ranger squeezed into the opening until only his hindquarters remained visible. Ethan reached for him, then stopped. The K9 was not panicking. He was working. His breathing changed as he searched the hidden space. A muffled bark came from beyond the wall. Then the buried man cried out, not from injury, but surprise. The dog found my boot. There is a cable wrapped around it. Daniel handed Ethan a folding cutter. The gap was too narrow for either man's shoulders. Ethan clipped the tool to Ranger's short retrieval line and gave a command he had not used in years. Take. Ranger backed out, took the cutter gently in his mouth, and disappeared again. Lily watched from the upper doorway while Cal held her behind him. She could not see what Ranger was doing. She could hear Ethan guiding him with a steady voice. Forward. Easy. Hold. The old dog returned without the cutter. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then the red strap moved. Maria and Daniel pulled together. A man in a green trail jacket slid through the broken wall, one boot missing and his face white with cold. Ranger followed, carrying the severed loop of cable in his mouth. Out! Daniel shouted. They had just cleared the signal room when part of the ceiling dropped. Snow and timber sealed the passage behind them. Outside, everyone moved downslope from the shelter. The rescued man collapsed onto a blanket while Maria checked him. He was in his late 60s, with a white beard and a scar across one cheek. Cal recognized him. Wade Mercer. The man opened his eyes. Wade had once owned the largest timber company in the county. He had also promised Margaret the first major donation for Second Watch, then withdrew after the mill controversy. Cal had not spoken to him since Margaret's funeral. What were you doing here? Cal asked. Wade looked at the dispatch box in Daniel's hands. Trying to return what I took. The words turned the cold air heavier. Wade explained between strained breaths. 3 days earlier, he had climbed to the lookout after hearing that Ethan Walker was asking about Margaret's journal. Years ago, Wade had used his influence on the county board to keep the mill review closed. His company had owned the abandoned building. Inspectors had warned him about failed wiring, unstable flooring, and the damaged radio repeater mounted on the property. Repairs would have cost money and delayed a land sale. He had persuaded officials that the risks were manageable. After the rescue, he withdrew support from Margaret's K9 retirement project and allowed public attention to settle on Ethan's disobedience. I told myself I was protecting jobs, Wade said. I was protecting my name. He had known Margaret kept copies of the records. After her death, he came to the lookout intending to remove them, but he could not break the seal on the box. He hid it in the signal room instead. When news of Ethan's rescue spread, Wade returned to put it back. The damaged ceiling collapsed before he could leave. Daniel stared at him. You let an officer carry the blame for your building. Wade did not defend himself. Ethan looked toward Ranger. The K-9 stood beside Lily, snow dusting his muzzle. He had just risked himself to save a man whose cowardice had shaped years of Ethan's life. Lily followed Ethan's gaze. Ranger did not know what he did, she said quietly. No, Ethan answered. Would it have changed anything? Ethan watched Wade shiver beneath the rescue blanket. I hope not. The weather window began closing sooner than predicted. Clouds covered the sun, and wind lifted loose snow from the ridge. Maria radioed for a medical team to meet them below. Wade could walk with support, but the missing boot and bruised leg slowed him. They secured the dispatch box and Margaret's pack to the utility sled. Ethan was ordered to ride, yet he refused until Wade took the first position. My leg is protected, Ethan said. His is not. Daniel gave him a long look, but did not argue. Ranger moved ahead with Maria, checking the alternate trail. On the descent, his pace became uneven. Ethan noticed before anyone else. His left front boot. Maria stopped. Ice had packed around the injured pad. She cleaned it and adjusted the wrap, but Ranger resisted when she tried to place him on the sled. He will not ride while Ethan is walking, Daniel said. Ethan crouched with difficulty. Ranger, place. The K-9 looked at the trail, then at Ethan. Your watch is over for today, Ethan said. Place. Ranger stepped onto the sled. Ethan walked beside him, one hand on the rail. Every few minutes, the dog lifted his head to make sure Ethan was still there. The group reached the cabin near dusk. Wade was taken to the clinic. Before leaving, he asked Ethan to come closer. I cannot return the years. No, I can tell the truth. You will. Wade nodded. And the land Margaret wanted for the K-9 home. My company still owns the lower meadow. I will transfer it. Ethan's expression remained guarded. Do not buy forgiveness. I am not asking for it. Then do it because it should have been done 13 years ago. Wade accepted that. That night, Cal placed the dispatch box on the kitchen table. Ranger slept near the fire after a veterinarian examined his paw and ordered several days of rest. Lily sat beside him, running one finger along the edge of Margaret's wooden sign. The box required 2 keys. One had been taped inside the journal. Daniel had carried the second on his key ring for 13 years. His hand shook when he inserted it. The lock opened. Inside were copies of inspection reports, radio logs, photographs, and Margaret's written account. At the bottom lay a small digital recorder sealed in a plastic pouch. Daniel pressed play. Static filled the room. Then came the voices from the mill. Daniel's order to hold position. Ethan reporting Ranger's alert. Dispatch sending a second team to the wrong unit number. Ethan warning that the child's cries had stopped. A pause. Then Ethan's voice, younger but unmistakable. I am moving east with Ranger. Send backup to Brooks. Repeat. Brooks has no confirmation. More static. Ranger barking. A child coughing. Ethan calling that he had the boy. Then another sound, distant and urgent. Scout barking from behind the loading dock wall. Ethan's command came through the recorder. Ranger, find Brooks. The audio became chaotic. Boots, radios, a crash of timber. Finally, an outside officer shouted that Ranger had found the trapped K-9 team. The recording ended. No one moved. Ethan sat with his face lowered. For 13 years, he had remembered entering the mill against orders. He had forgotten the clarity with which he requested help. He had forgotten sending Ranger back. Guilt had erased every action that did not support the story, he told himself. Daniel removed his badge and set it on the table. I should resign. Ethan looked up. That would be another way of leaving. Daniel flinched. You should tell the truth, Ethan continued. All of it. Then stay long enough to repair what you helped break. Cal turned Margaret's wooden sign so the words faced them. Second watch K-9 home. What will you build from what hurt you? Lily asked. This time, Ethan had an answer. A place where service does not end in abandonment. Daniel looked at Scout's name in Margaret's journal. And a training program where handlers learned that admitting a mistake is part of protecting their team. Cal placed his hand over Margaret's initials. The meadow is not enough. She wanted the cabin, the lower barn, and the ridge trail included. I will put them into a trust. Lily looked down at Ranger. Can he be the first dog? Ethan's voice softened. He has been the first dog all along. The truth did not repair everything at once. The county reopened the mill review. Wade Mercer appeared before the board and admitted that his company had ignored safety warnings. Daniel gave a full statement about the failed radio, his decision not to replace the battery, and the anger that kept him silent afterward. Ethan was formally cleared of wrongdoing, but the announcement did not feel like victory. It felt like the end of a sentence he had been serving inside himself. Reporters came to the cabin. Ethan refused every request that tried to turn the story into a simple tale of one hero and one villain. There were frightened people making costly choices, he said. There was a system more interested in protecting its reputation than correcting the truth. And there was a K9 who kept doing his job when the rest of us stopped acting like a team. He always brought the conversation back to Ranger. The old German shepherd recovered slowly. For 2 weeks, Ethan slept on a cot beside the fireplace because Ranger was not supposed to climb the stairs. Each morning, Lily arrived before breakfast to change the water bowl and inspect the bandage under Ethan's supervision. Ranger accepted her care with solemn patience. When she finished, he touched his nose to her wrist, the same quiet gesture he had given her in the ravine. Wade transferred the lower meadow and paid for the abandoned barn to be rebuilt. He did not place his name on the property. Cal donated the cabin and surrounding trail land to a nonprofit trust. Daniel convinced the K9 unit to provide retired equipment, veterinary partnerships, and a rotation of young handlers who needed to learn from older dogs. Ethan nearly refused the director's position. He had spent years living quietly, working seasonal security jobs, and avoiding every place that reminded him of the badge. Standing in front of a room again frightened him more than the mountain. Lily found him alone in the half-finished barn one evening. Snowmelt tapped. From the roof. Ranger lay on a folded blanket near the door. "You are thinking about leaving," she said. Ethan leaned against a new stall gate. "I am thinking they may need someone better. Grandma chose you. She also wrote that I relied too much on rules. She wrote that before Ranger trained you." Ethan laughed, but Lily did not. "He went through the storm because he believed you were worth coming back to," she said. "Maybe you should believe him." Ranger lifted his head at the sound of his name. Ethan looked at the gray around the dog's eyes, the worn collar, and the second watch words Margaret had scratched beneath his service number. "All right," he said. By spring, the barn had become a warm retirement lodge with 6 indoor runs, an open training floor, and wide doors for dogs with limited mobility. The old hooks from the north lookout were mounted above the entrance. Scout's hook held his collar, donated by Daniel. Ranger's remained empty because he still wore his. The first resident was Belle, a retired tracking dog whose handler had died the previous year. She arrived anxious, pacing every wall and refusing to sleep. Ranger watched her from across the room for most of the afternoon. No one directed him. When Belle finally lay down, Ranger crossed the floor and settled several feet away. He did not crowd her. He did not demand attention. He simply stayed. By morning, Belle was asleep with her back against his. "That is the program," Ethan told the young handlers watching from the doorway. "Not the building. Not the paperwork. That." Second watch grew from there. Retired K9s came from counties across Montana and neighboring states. Some returned home with former handlers after temporary care. Others stayed at the meadow and became companions for veterans, first responders, and families who understood that trust could not be rushed. Daniel taught a course about communication failures and moral courage. He began every session with the mill recording, including his own mistakes. The first time he played it for recruits, his voice shook. By the 10th time, it still hurt, but shame no longer controlled the room. Wade volunteered on repair days. Cal never became his friend, but he accepted honest work when he saw it. Forgiveness, Cal said, was not pretending the past had changed. It was deciding the past would not own every future choice. Lily became Ranger's unofficial assistant. She learned hand signals, scent games, canine first aid, and the importance of letting an old working dog rest even when his eyes still asked for a task. On the anniversary of the storm, the county held a small ceremony at Second Watch. Ethan disliked ceremonies, but this one belonged to more people than him. Cal hung Margaret's wooden sign above the main doors. Daniel placed Scout's old training ball beneath his hook. Maria presented Lily with a volunteer rescue jacket, several sizes too large, and told her she could grow into it. Then Ethan brought Ranger forward. The K9 moved slowly now. His injured paw had healed, but age had settled into his hips. He wore no vest, only his collar and badge. Ethan knelt beside him. Ranger spent his life being called to work, he told the crowd. Today, there is no command. There is only gratitude. He removed the silver badge from Ranger's collar. For a moment, the old dog looked at the space where it had hung. Then Ethan attached a new tag. It carried no unit number. One side read Ranger. The other read Home. Lily covered her mouth. Daniel looked toward the ceiling. Cal pressed Margaret's whistle into Ethan's hand. Ranger leaned against Ethan's chest, and Ethan held him there while the room remained quiet. Years later, visitors would ask which rescue made Ranger famous. Some had heard about the mill. Others knew the story of the blizzard, the cabin, or the man beneath the collapsed lookout. Ethan always gave the same answer. His greatest rescue was not a single day. Ranger had rescued a child from a mill. He had led a team to Daniel and Scout. He had crossed a whiteout to find Lily. He had saved Wade without knowing whether Wade deserved it. But his deepest work had taken years. He had kept Ethan connected to the part of himself that guilt tried to bury. He had waited through silence. He had trusted when people failed. He had shown them that loyalty was not blind agreement. Sometimes it was the courage to alert, to resist, to return, and to stay. Lily was 16 when Second Watch opened its second lodge. On the morning of the dedication, she walked to the porch of the original cabin and found Ethan sitting beside Ranger. The German Shepherd was very old. His muzzle had turned almost white, and he needed help standing on cold mornings. But his eyes remained clear. A transport van rolled into the meadow carrying a retired K-9 named Atlas. The younger dog would not leave the crate. New place, new smells, no familiar handler. Ranger heard him. He rose slowly. Ethan reached to help, but Ranger steadied himself and walked toward the barn. Lily opened the gate. Atlas watched from the shadows of the crate as Ranger approached. The old K-9 stopped several feet away and lay down. He did not bark. He did not pull. He waited. After several minutes, Atlas stretched one paw beyond the crate, then his nose, then the rest of him. He crossed the space and lay beside Ranger. Ethan stood with Lily in the doorway. The first snow of the season began to fall over the meadow, soft and quiet, covering the ground without hiding the path between the cabin and the barn. Lily looked at Ranger and remembered the storm, the ravine, and the moment a tired German shepherd had trusted a child to understand. He is still working, she whispered. Ethan shook his head gently. No, he is teaching us how to stay. Ranger rested his head beside Atlas. His tail touched the floor once. Outside, the snow continued falling. Inside, no loyal soul was forgotten. What would loyalty like Ranger's mean in your life? Share your thoughts and subscribe for more stories about courage, healing, and the extraordinary bonds that lead us home.